I bid you welcome.
I welcome you to my house.
Welcome to my house.
Welcome to my home.
Hello Horror Hounds, welcome to my horror house. I'm way overdue looking at any of the Amicus portmanteau movies, so to make amends I'm going to do all of them in order, which means we're going to start with Dr. Terror's House of Horrors. Amicus is a film company that I guess wanted a slice of the Hammer action in the late 60s and early 70s. They came to be synonymous for a sort of in-house style, which did include these anthology or portmanteau movies, and where Hammer was synonymous with gothic and period pieces, for the most part the Amicus horror movies are set in the modern day. This first movie is directed by Freddie Francis and written by Amicus head honcho Milton Subotsky, who has the perfect name for a movie producer. All movie producers should be called Milton Subotsky, although that would get really confusing. In my head, he sounds something like this. My name's Milton Subotsky, and I want some of that sweet Hammer do-re-mi. Knock me up a horror film pronto. Subotsky took as his inspiration the superlative Dead of Night and figured, and I think he figured correctly, that there was a gap in the market for these anthology or portmanteau movies. So he cobbled together 5 stories of his own devising with an overarching sort of framework, narrative, and sort of set the groundwork for the movies that were to come from the Amicus stable. Dr. Terror's House of Horrors is the first, but not the best. This one is the 5 guys on a train one, joined by Peter Cushing, who reads them their fortunes with his tarot cards, or tarot as he insists weirdly on pronouncing it. And with this format set, it becomes the inspiration for so many copycats and parodies. Amicus is not going to be afraid to copy itself at all, as we'll find out. And one of the most notable parodies, I think, is this sort of hidden gem of the BBC archives, Dr. Terrible's House of Horrible. Subotsky names his segments very prosaically. The first story is called simply Werewolf. An architect returns to a Scottish island, his old familial home where he grew up, now belongs to another because he's been commissioned to do some work on his old sort of ancestral home. And there's actually a lot of backstory in this for such a compressed story. You find out that before his family owned it, it was owned by another family and one of his ancestors killed them, and then there's a curse. And long story short, he finds a coffin in the cellar, and the legend has it that there's the body of a werewolf in there, and shenanigans happen. Yes, shenanigans. It's a great set. The house looks great, the basement looks great, the coffin looks great, the sort of fog-bound soundstage set exterior. It all has a sort of 4-colour EC comic vibe to it, and it's quite a bit of a fun romp, and I actually really quite liked the payoff of this story, which I can't say for all of them. The second story is simply called Creeping Vine, by a country mile the weakest story of all 5. This one stars Alan Fluff Freeman, as he was known, more famous for being a radio DJ, so the notion of stunt casting is not a new phenomenon. He's the head of a family who return home from a family holiday to find a strange new vine growing outside their house. A vine that physically resists his attempts to cut it with a pair of shears. A murderous vine, a vine with intent. He, once again, because the stories are very compressed, instantly goes to a couple of scientists who instantly say, yeah, that sounds interesting. We'll spend an awful lot of our time at the house studying this plant, which you say is behaving really weirdly. There's no way around this. There is absolutely no way to make a plant look scary when what it is someone off camera shaking the vine so the leaves shake, or just moving it into the window. A vine leaf creeping up behind someone is not a scary prospect. Alan Freeman is not an actor. He's a radio disc jockey. Whew, and it shows. The third story is called simply Voodoo, and this is where the energy starts to pick up. It stars a couple of my childhood TV heroes, Roy Castle and Kenny Lynch. Some of you may know Roy Castle from another film he starred in with Peter Cushing, Doctor Who and the Daleks. In this, he plays a jazz trumpeter who, with his band, get a gig in the West Indies. Oh, by the way, he's played trumpet in real life, and all the music in this is played for real. The soundtrack to this segment, it's really swinging, man. This is the story of a very sort of arrogant, full of himself young man who clearly needs to be taken down a peg or two, and he's one of those Brits abroad who are just so bloody annoying, and when he's there he sort of disrespects the local religion, which happens to be voodoo, even though he's quite clearly told, this is a religion, man, you need to tread carefully, these people believe it and they believe strongly in it, stop taking the mickey. What he does is he creeps up on a ritual and notes down their sacred beats, which they're forbidden to write down, and he transposes it into a sort of jazz number and takes it home and plays it when he's back in the UK. This forbidden music sounds really good, I've got to be honest. His jazz arrangement of it is superb, but it does get him into a spot of bother with the Haitian deities. This feels very much like a story that you might have found in some of the earlier Pan books of horror, very much a sort of post-colonial British attitude of the world, but then these strange and foreign corners of the globe coming back to bite the Englishman on the neck. The fourth story is called Disembodied Hand, which kind of gives the game away. This is the high water mark for the whole anthology, not least because it stars Christopher Lee and Michael Gough, and they give it all their worth. Before the horror really creeps in, it's actually a great watch. Michael Gough is an artist and Christopher Lee is a really snooty art critic. In fact, all the way through this, on all the train carriage sequences, Christopher Lee gives so much bang for the buck. Even when he doesn't have lines of dialogue, his reactions, his expressions, absolutely priceless. Here he's a snooty art critic who just has it in for this artist, and any effort he can to dig at him and bring him down, he'll do it, until the tables are turned and Michael Gough decides to play a prank on him and gets him to praise a painting that is then revealed was done by a chimpanzee. This war of attrition between the two of them escalates and leads Christopher Lee to hit the artist with his car, leaving him without a hand and without a career. But because the segment's called Disembodied Hand, the hand itself has a part to play in the rest of the story, as you would imagine. God bless Christopher Lee for giving it the best of British, even in the face of a very clearly plastic hand that moves on its own. The mechanics of it, the fact of it, is actually quite ambitious. I don't know why you would shoot it so that you could see the seam of the mould running up the side of the whole of the finger and then the wrist. The thing looks a lot better once it's been burnt and is then all grizzled and sort of gnarly and dark and burnt. Gotta love him. Christopher Lee acts as if there is actually a disembodied hand moving towards him and not this strange little mechanical rubber thing. The fifth story is called Vampire, and it stars Donald Sutherland. He is a doctor, newly married to his French bride, and they move back to the United States of America, where he has a small practice in a small town with another doctor, an elderly doctor. And just as his wife likes to start gazing out at the moon at night while he's asleep, young children start appearing in the clinic, seemingly anemic with bite marks on their neck. What's a country doctor to do? Everything escalates again really quickly because they've got to jam this story into a very short period of time. 5 stories and a framework device is a lot to jam into a movie. You might say perhaps too much, but this one rattles along so fast that the incongruities just whiz by. Yeah, and of course people are going to accept that, oh, this must be a vampire. It's kind of saved by a funny little punchline at the end, and I'll be honest, round about when I was 9 or 10, this kind of vampire romp would have been exactly the thing I was into. With all the stories told, we get, as we will with all of these portmanteau movies, a little coda. And don't you know, when the train stops at the station and they all disembark, well, they were all dead all along. They died in the train crash, which kind of makes you question why Dr. Schreck was telling them their fortune in the first place, as if they had a fate that they could change. None of it really bears too much scrutiny. What it is it's fun. It's the kind of ending that has been parodied so much now. I'm not even sure, I've got no way of knowing whether it was even original at the time it was made, but by now it is so ripe for cliche and parody that it's just, you just roll your eyes and chuckle and go with it. You have to. Freddie Francis directs this really competently. He keeps things really visually interesting, especially inside the train carriage. You've got 6 men crammed inside a train carriage, and he keeps things looking interesting, feeling fresh, and that has to be applauded. Do you know what? There's a lot in this film that you could make fun of if you were of a mind to, and I completely get why you might want to do that. It just seems like an old friend to me, a sort of Saturday afternoon Scooby-Doo marathon, or reading through a whole bunch of horror comics. And some of my favourite faces are there. Peter Cushing's there, Christopher Lee's there, Michael Gough's there. Hell yeah, Donald Sutherland's there. Of course they were all dead all along. What did you honestly expect? So the formula's set, and Amicus and Milton Subotsky is going to mine that seam again and again and again, and I hope you will join me on what I hope will be a very enjoyable whistle-stop tour through all of the Amicus portmanteau movies.